Yes, this is the Compendium Podcast. I'm Michael Stickler. I'm the publisher of leadership books. And today I've got just a fun guest, a guy that I've really connected hearts with. His name's Michael Hinkle. Michael has got an incredible career that he's going to tell you a little bit about, and about his book, Treasure Hunt, and his course, and all the different things that he's doing. So, Michael, welcome to the Compendium Podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
So let's jump right in. Michael, why did you write this book? Tell me what compelled you to do this.
Well, like most really great things in life, I was drug into this kicking and screaming. Um, we never pick the right road to go down. We just usually get forced down it, and then we go, wow, what a great decision I made.
Oh, really?
I grew up with a deputy sheriff and a ER nurse for a mom, and when I was growing up, they weren't very involved in my life because they were busy trying to create a life for us. And I did a lot of sports and stuff growing up, and I did a lot of stuff solo. So when I started having kids, I got deeply involved in their lives. I coached everything they did. I was at every event I could possibly be at. That's why I chose a life in sales. It gave me the flexibility to invest the time where I really wanted to invest it, and that was in my kids. Well, my middle child was in baseball, and I was deeply involved in that. And he finally graduated from high school and chose not to continue on in baseball. And I started getting a little lost and confused. I was so used to being on the field at 3 o'clock and then 3:30 in the afternoon. I started winding my day down, preparing for the 3:30, but I had no place to go. So I started doing something that was fairly destructive. And of course, I didn't really want to continue to go down. I was hitting the bars.
Yeah.
I'd call it a day. I didn't have a baseball game to go to, so I went to a bar. And after 2 or 3 months, my son went up to my wife and said, "You know what? I think me being out of baseball is harder than dad than it is me." So I found a life coach. I needed to help someone get my mind screwed back on, right? And the more we talked, the more she encouraged me to. She liked my story. She loved the story I was telling, and she suggested that I write it down as a legacy. And from that small nudge, I say small, it was a major nudge. In fact, she gets credit in the book. Um, it started me writing it down, and it was a long process until I really sold out, and then it was a very quick process after that. But ultimately, what happened is I had about 40 pages of manuscript put together. I submitted it to a publisher, to Forbes, and they said, "You have some good thoughts here. Really like to pursue this," and I wrote the book.
Mm.
And one of the things that I really accomplished, and this is really important to me, I want to say this, and this is what made the project worthwhile to me. When I look back at it, one of the things I've walked away with is a new montage for my life, a new line of hope. And that's, I have a new saying: the why is way more important than the results. Would I have loved to have been a top-selling Stephen King type producer of this book and be raking in the dollars and unbelievably so? Yeah, but that's not why I did it. Why I did it was to leave a legacy for my kids so they would understand what my life was about, what I was about, what I did. And hopefully somebody can pick the book up and find a reason to be more successful in their career.
Yeah, but your book is so much more than just a memoir. And I don't mean to minimize memoirs. Your book is really insightful, thought out tools that will help um, people coming up in their careers, in their lives. There's just a lot to it. And so you've got 10 points in there, and the first one starts out, and you got a great story about what happens. So that first part about looking for treasure. Tell
Yeah,
us about that.
that's that was my that is the crux of everything I do. My life developed around that idea. I was fortunate to run into a gentleman early in my career in sales that saw the potential in me that I couldn't see for myself. And he saw the frustration I had, and he took me and set me aside one day and basically said, you, who's that guy sitting across from us? We were sitting in well, unfortunately, we'd gone to a place where they serve adult beverages again. Um, and we were pining over my fledgling career over a beer. And he says, "Who do you see across the way here?" And I looked and it was a mirror and I said, "Us." And he goes, "Really?" And he goes, "Who do you really see?" And he was trying to get my attention and get me to start thinking. And he goes, "You don't seem to be having fun right now. Why is that?" And I
Hmm.
said, "Well, sales is hard. I mean, let's face it. I picked a career where you get told 9 out of 10 times and you celebrate the 10th time." And I said, "That's tough." And
Sometimes
he
more
goes,
no. Sometimes there's more no's than even 9. Yeah.
"Yes, there's a number out there. For some people, it's 9. For some people, it's 99."
Yeah.
And at the time, I was thinking mine was more like 999.
Yeah.
And he said, if I took you and put you in front of a big chunk of land right now and said, underneath some of these stones, 1 acre square piece of land, strewn about is all these rocks. And if I told you underneath some of these rocks are big chunks of gold and under others are little chunks, and under a lot of them, there's nothing at all. He goes, what would you do? Turn 5 or 4 over, or, 5 or 6 over, and then come back and visit me and say, "Hey, let's go to the bar?" I said, "No, I'd turn them all over." And he said, "Welcome to sales. That's what you have to do. That's where your mindset needs to be." And I'm not the smartest knife in any drawer, but I'm not the dullest one either. And I said, "I think he's got a thought here. I'm going to
Yeah.
have to pursue that."
Yeah, it's really amazing that if you get discouraged by the ones that are nothing, there's nothing under, you really haven't earned the right to turn over the one that has something under it. You know,
No,
and
no,
when
you haven't. And people miss that all the time.
yeah, the hard work of something, the it doesn't matter what it is. The hard work, the risk, the challenge of it all is what we're trying to avoid. And instead of recognizing this is the path it takes to being successful, you know. And I think, by the way, I think our politicians have a real hard time with that. They just want everything to be their way instead of doing the hard work um, of, of
Well, and that's another thing about the book. I started I was in competitive swimming through college, and I started coaching when I was 18. And I always enjoyed coaching.
mm,
And that's why you said there's a lot in my book to unpack. Once I had a venue under which to get all of my thoughts out there, my first instinct was to go to my coaching module in my mind, which is where I like to be.
mm,
Um, and I saw it as an opportunity to share some insight because I've seen a lot of really bad salespeople, and I've seen some successful salespeople that really have no right to be successful other than they're in the right spot at the right time and someone gave them something and they didn't screw it up.
right, right, yeah, yeah. There's that follow through that you can still screw up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you say that. I recently went through um, a process, and these guys were selling me something that was pretty significant. Okay. I mean, it would have been a pretty nice reward for them. And they had a process, and I was very respectful of it. And as we went through the process, my confidence grew, my trust level grew. And the final meeting, we had already reviewed contracts and everything. We get to the final meeting with their founder, and he took the trust level at that point from like a 9.5 to like a 4 in 3 seconds. And I'm looking at him going, what? how do you make a living doing this? You're just self-destructive, and I don't know if he had a bad day. I don't know if he was just an a-hole. I don't know what he was, okay? But all I know is I never returned the phone call after that. I told him, you know what? I'm not um you took the trust level down to a 4. He didn't even have an answer for that, and didn't reply back to him. And I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars they would have earned through this process. What what is it that happens to guys like that? What is it that causes those things to happen?
Well, the easy and quick answer always ego.
Mm,
When you're bigger than the deal, when your ego is bigger than the deal, you're focused on you. I made a point in my career to focus on my client.
yeah,
I tried to get them what they needed out of the deal, knowing that when I did that for them, I would get what I needed out of the deal, i.e., my paycheck.
yeah,
Um, I read this book once. I think you're familiar with it. It said service to others before self.
yeah,
Kind of is a great theme. I like to
yeah.
stick to that.
Yeah, you know what? You just nailed it on the head. If obviously I don't want to reveal who this guy is, but he's just very full of himself. Um, you know, acted like I was fortunate enough to be on a Zoom call with him, that kind of thing. And one of the things he did do it as when he texted me back is, throw it all on his sales manager that he screwed it up and didn't prepare uh, me, not him, me for the meeting. Um, and it was a weird experience. The and when I think about that, I think about you've got it exactly right. If you're working together in this to achieve the same kind of goal, what is in this case, your customer, your client need, and can I do that? And then what it also caused for me is that I immediately just started looking. Okay.
Yeah.
And as soon as I looked around, it didn't take long before I found another organization that provides very similar service, but this time there was no push. This time there was, we'll accommodate what you need. They negotiated some actually very minor points of the contract with us. My attorneys have to look at my contracts, and and they got a check from me yesterday, and just because they were kind. And the other thing is that they had very provable. Uh, it was surprisingly how provable their deliverables were, where the other group had a much harder time demonstrating their provable deliverables. Um,
Well, again, I'm going to take it back to what I said. It's probably the company you chose to do business with
yeah,
is more focused externally
yeah,
about what they can do for you, where he's more focused internally. I mean, and the biggest clue you just gave to that was when his sales manager didn't prepare you for what you need to be ready for in the meeting. You didn't need to be ready for anything. You were the client.
yeah,
He was trying to get you to spend money with him. What prep did you need?
yeah, 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 yeah. It's funny that I say it is because it just really all went south very quickly because we had gone back and forth with the contract. My attorney had, and I know you know this, but attorneys have a tendency to often,
Justify their income.
yeah, push back on every point, and whatnot. And I usually sensitive as an entrepreneur, I'm sensitive to that and kind of come to the middle grounds. But some of it, he had real good points, and so I presented that. And then when we got on the call, I said, "Hey, could you let my recorder in? I want to make sure I have a copy of this so I can share it with my team." And they said no. And I said, "Well," very nicely, I said, "Well, why not?" And the meeting went south from that point. It was really odd. And I mean, I could understand if he would have said, "Well, I'll get you a recording of it. We just don't want so many recorders in or whatever." So why do I say this? I say this because there is such a key portion of what we should be doing, serving other people, being responsive to other people. And gosh, Michael, you hit it on the head. This ego that's more important about you and what you're going to get than it is about how you're going to serve. What's the long-term ramification between those two parallel thoughts?
Um, Financial success and poverty.
What do you mean?
Ego doesn't make you money. Serving others does.
Yeah,
I believe that I truly believe I built my career on the concept of serving others. Little known fact, I've always strived to get to the top. I happen to be an Eagle Boy Scout, and for those of you that don't know, two out of every 100 young men that join the scouting organization get to be an Eagle Scout. That's
yeah,
2%.
wow.
So I'm part of a very elite club, and at more than 50 years old, actually a lot more, but I say, I still brag about the fact I'm an Eagle Scout because it's a representation of an accomplishment I made. And
Yeah,
I was focused on achieving results. And I've been doing that my whole career. I swam in college because in the fourth grade, my mom told me I'd never learn how to swim.
um,
I played this little game called rugby because someone
mhm.
told me once I was too short for it. You know, I'm the wrong person to tell me what I can't do
Yeah,
because it just fires up a spark plug in me that just says, okay, watch me roll.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, boy, I so resonate with that. I grew up dyslexic and now I've written 20 books. You know, my life is in publishing. And it's all because my fourth grade teacher, when I stood up, she called us to read something and I stood up to read and she told me, sit down, you can't read.
Yeah.
And I'm a little over 50 myself. And it's still when I publicly speak or I go to read something from the platform, that voice tries to pop its little self into my head. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to move forward with this. And so sometimes those hard times are what becomes the leverage point, the tipping point for someone to be successful.
Well, it takes a lot of pressure to turn a lump of coal into a diamond.
Yeah,
And he put a lot of pressure on me.
right, right.
Not quite the diamond yet that he wants, but I'm a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah, and I sure go back to you that comment about poverty and making a living. It's really true when you serve people, when you think about them first, when you try to deliver on everything you ever said, uh, those things are what keep you in customers and moving forward. And a lot of us think about sales like what used to be, and I say this way, what used to be car salesmen. Car salesmen were just going to go out there and get the best deal they could for themselves. And now the more successful dealerships, they know the numbers. They know you're going to look for a car. I don't know what it is, every 3 years or every five
Yeah.
years or whatever. And they give you a great experience and then they mark it on their calendar or their computer pops it up that this guy's going to, and then they reach out to you again when it's about that time for you to start thinking about another car and because you had a great experience. I never thought I would have a relationship with a car salesman. But in my life, I've had, I don't know what, 15, 20 cars. And of course I will, you know.
Yeah.
One sale turns into maybe four or five over a period of time.
And that's the mark of a good salesperson. That's someone that's working for you, not for them, working for you. It's a theme that I stick with. It permeates in my life. That car salesman that sold you four cars didn't do it because he was trying to get you to buy the first one. He
Yeah.
was able to do it because he listened to what you said, found what solved your problems,
Yeah.
and did that, and then benefited from it three more times because he was smart enough to realize this isn't about him, it was about you.
Yeah. And you go into that experience the second time with your defenses down. You know,
Exactly.
you don't go into it going, "Ah, this guy's trying to screw me out of this deal, and he's gonna this, and he's gonna put me in a little room and make me wait for 3 hours, while he goes and has coffee just to soften me up." You don't go in there with any of those defenses. You just go in going, "Hey, the guy's gonna make a deal for me." And often the deal's already made, the paperwork's already drawn up, the car's already cleaned up and prepped, and all you're doing is going in to sign the papers and drive it home,
Exactly.
which is how I bought my last pickup truck. Uh,
You know, I had a situation once where um, it really drove that point home to me. I had stayed loyal to this particular car dealer, and I think I was, I was in sales, so I went through a lot of cars. I was there at the apex of my career. I was doing about 4,000 miles a month
yeah.
in the car. So I chewed them up. I had to get a new car every other year. Usually I always did leases. I just accepted the fact I was going to always have a car payment. I figured out how to roll the damage into it and move forward. So I was a pretty good client. And I show up and the salesman, accomplishes all this. We have it all set up. And then sets me an appointment to show up with the finance guy at 5 o'clock at night so I can get my car. I get there at 5. The GM decided he wanted to have an appointment with the finance guy at 5 o'clock instead of him selling me a car.
No.
I waited for about 15 minutes, went over to my salesperson and said, "So you mean to tell me that it's more important your GM has a meeting with your finance guy than it is selling an automobile? Now, are you sure I'm in the right dealership?" And I called the GM on that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really did. And that's just, again, that's losing focus of who the customer is.
Yeah.
It might have been a very important issue that GM had to go over with the finance guy, but at the sake of actually dealing with a long-term customer that had been so loyal to you, that was, for lack of a better way to put it, stinking thinking.
Yeah. In the same way of serving, back in the 90s, I used to run a homeless mission, and our operations manager, we were looking for a 12-passenger van. We needed one pretty desperately. And he had gotten a hold of this dealer, and the guy said, "You know what? We know who you are, and we'd really like to, we're going to donate a van to you." And our operations manager was just really excited. And he said, "Come down at 2 o'clock and ask for the owner." Okay. And he'll meet with you and make this deal happen. He was excited. He wanted me to go with him. And this guy actually was from a competitor of where he sent us. So this was like dealer, we'll call him dealer number one, and he sent us to dealer number two and told us the owner's name. And when we walked in there, the owner's secretary said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Smith is not even in the country. I'm very confused what's happened." And so we got to talking to him, or talking to her, and she put us in touch with the GM. And the GM sat down and said, "I hate to tell you, but you've been duped. These guys over here sent you over here just as a joke. We didn't know anything about you coming. We didn't know anything about this. And I feel really bad. So I'm gonna work this out for you." And because he didn't give us the van, but he made it such a deal that it was close to being given to us.
Mhm.
Because he did, he had no reason to do it. Okay. He had no reason other than he just felt bad that these crooked guys down the road did this to us. That I bought my next 5 cars from that dealership. I wouldn't go anywhere else. And you know what? Within a year, that the first one was out of business. There was a big lease sign on there, you know. And I'm like, back to ego, like you said, back to ego and not service. It's just amazing how people can't see that. And why don't they see it? Why do they get what leads them into thinking that this is a sales method that works?
Um, Marginal success in the beginning.
Mm,
Um, unfortunately, poor clients have been the demise of many a poor salesperson. Um, Sometimes you have some success at the beginning with some very bad habits. It doesn't make you good at what you do. It just makes you think you're better than what you are.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
and if you have you have a modicum of success doing a poor job at something, you're going to continue to do it that way until life proves you shouldn't. And unfortunately, for a poor salesperson, that the life will prove it to you by turning you into your new career, which is, would you like fries with that shake?
Right. Right. So we've been talking about car dealers. Where did you make your living? I know you didn't sell cars.
Oh, not at all. No. I was in the real estate industry. Actually, I came to sales in the traditional sales trajectory of life. I graduated college with a poli-sci degree with a history minor,
Mm.
highly marketable skills because I was
Right.
going to go to work for a city government. I got my first job with the county of Riverside in California.
Mhm.
And I'm not afraid to say their name because that's actually, I explain my journey in my book. And I was there for 3 or 4 years in my mid 20s. And there was a complete turnover of the management team of the department I worked for. And the new department had been previously the assistant department director. And I asked him, what's my future here? What kind of, I see there's a lot of upward mobility right now. Am I being set up for anything? What's my growth here? And he looked me square in the eye and said, I can honestly tell you, Mike, no one under the age of 30 is ever going to have any kind of responsibility in my department. And I was already responsible for all the contracts throughout the county of Riverside for concessionary issues. I did farm lease, I did agricultural leasing, I did equestrian leasing, entertainment leasing, boat ramps, marinas. Had a lot of, I had my fingers in a lot of different things, and it was all monetary gains for the county. So, and I had a lot of, since I'd been working in the real estate industry from the county side, I said, okay, fine. Well, then I guess I'm going into the private sector and made arrangements and made a move out of real estate for the county of Riverside to real estate in the private sector. And there I spent the rest of my life doing real estate. I was a broker, so I sold I represented clients buying and selling homes. I was in the mortgage industry. I did loan origination for a while. I ran an escrow company for a while. And I spent the last 24 years in the title insurance industry. All of
Mm.
my experiences was working with builders, the large public builders. If I, think of the top 10 builders in the US right now, at one time or another, I've worked with 8 or 9 of them.
Wow.
So, and that's on a national level. So, it proved to be a very worthwhile career for me. I proved to be very good at it. One of the first things that I came to, I mean, when I began right at the beginning, before I even got started, I was looking at what I'm doing in this industry, and I realized that there was nothing unique about my loan products, or nothing unique about my title insurance, nothing unique about escrow, nothing unique about selling a piece of real estate. The only unique thing about it was me. So I said,
Mhm.
okay, the only product I've got to improve on a day-to-day basis is myself. If I
Mhm.
keep getting better at what I do, more and more people are going to come see me. And that is how I started this journey out that down that track.
That is a great story, and it's a good one for our listeners to take home. I think of it in the same sense, I identify it in the same sense as book publishing. There's a lot of people out there publishing books, but what makes it unique? What makes leadership books unique? What makes us rise above the others? And it's not necessarily duplicating what they did. It's out serving what your competitors are doing. It's out giving a personal attention, trying to meet not only their fears and concerns, but also making friends out of them over a period of time. And I, I I'm absolutely convinced that's not what most publishers do. What they typically do is just, publish a book and move on to the next one, publish a book and move on to the next one, and don't even look back to see what happened with that book.
It's like spaghetti. You throw enough of it against the wall, some of it's going to stick.
Yeah, yeah, that's
You
just
know.
exactly true. Um,
Um,
Go
And
ahead.
you mentioned something that was key to what I do, and I actually use this moniker with my clients all the time. Whenever they told me that they were doing business with one of my competition and they were doing a majority of their business with them because they did a great job, I said, "That's great. I'm going to continue to show up and work with you and try to gain your business because I know one thing for sure. They're never going to outservice me."
Yeah.
I live that mantra. I mean, that was my call to battle every day. I'm going to get up earlier. I'm going to get there faster. I'm going to get it done quicker. I'm going to be smarter at it than anybody else. Again, focusing on what I control.
Yeah. Good answer. Hey, there's another motivation, the biggest motivation in your life that makes you do what you do, serve people most, and that's your relationship to the Lord. Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, my grandfather started taking me to church when I was in elementary school at my desire. And I started learning about the Lord in elementary school, junior high, high school, and continued that relationship as I grew up. Um, I have had no less than four different times in my life where God has reached down to me and said, "Michael, I would really like to have your attention. I think you're going the wrong direction right now. I want to get things straightened out." But unfortunately, God and I weren't necessarily on the same page. He felt the need for a 2x4 upside the head. I thought a
I
strongly
wondered
worded
if you're going to bring
email
it,
would work.
right? Strongly worded email. Sorry,
And
go on.
yeah, so there's at least four different times in my lifetime where I've walked away from traumatic accidents alive, where it was highly questionable whether or not I should have even walked away.
Yeah.
And all credit goes to him for that. Each time I try to go, okay, look, I didn't see that left. I'll take it next time.
Right.
So um, every time I drift aside, he says, "Whoa, Nelly, come on back this way." So he's been ever present. I raised my kids in a church. I gave them total freedom to choose. In fact, and I'm not picking on any religious. This is not a judgment. At one point, I raised my children Christian. My daughter decided in high school to become a Mormon. We encouraged that journey, and since then, she has gone back to a Christian church because of certain things in her world that it's those are her thoughts, not mine, and I'm not going to take her inventory. But I've always given my kids the freedom to make their own decisions on that vein, because it is a personal walk. Um,
Well, not only that, but that's God's
that's
way.
his job.
Well, yeah, but not just that, but it's his way. He gives us the right to choose too.
Yeah,
Okay.
he does.
He doesn't make us Christians. He calls us to be Christians. That causes a response from us. Okay. And when that response comes, then he embraces us as the wayward children, the prodigal sons that we were, and throws everything, throws the garments on us and brings us back home. And so that's a long time ago. I had a good friend. I was really worried about a guy who I knew and I had been discipling, and he found himself in the Mormon church and decided he was going to go with the Latter-day Saints. And the guy that mentored me said, "You know what? This is the Lord's responsibility. If the Lord is calling him, he'll get him turned around. Don't worry about it."
Yeah,
And I thought, man, that took all the burden off of me.
yeah. It was an interesting. Yeah, actually, you know what? I gained a lot from her time there too, because once one of the families in the Mormon church,
Mhm.
I had a lot of missionaries come by the house after that because, of course, they're going to convert the rest of the family,
Right.
and it made me be more in tune and better educated about my own beliefs as they shared their beliefs with me. I would just ask you, these poor
Yeah, of
18,
course.
these poor 18-year-old kids. that aren't living at home. They're out in the world trying to convince me of the Mormon faith. And I'm not picking on them. I was very nice to them, but they would make statements and I would say, is that really what it says? Which Bible is that one in?
Right.
And a lot of times it ended up being in the opposite book, the Book of Mormon versus the Bible I read.
Right.
And, I didn't challenge their beliefs. I just asked questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it made me learn more so I could ask the questions.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. This is I'm so glad. And so where is the Lord taking you now? You're kind of on a new turn in your life. Which way are you going? What's happening now?
Um, you know, when I was writing this book, as it was getting ready to come out, I happen to live in a community where not just one, but three pastors from Saddleback Church happen to live in my community. I lived around the corner from Rick Warren for a while, and then I moved to the bottom of the hill, and I lived next to one of his small groups pastor. And now, with the new transition in the leadership team at Saddleback, I live next to one of the other main pastors that came down from San Jose with Andy, who's the now head pastor at Saddleback.
Mhm.
So I get a lot of input. So I get a lot of opportunities to talk on the curb out in front of the house. And I started thinking about the themes under which I lived my life and how I approached my business when I was growing up. And, I never really gave God credit for what it is. I had been schooled well enough that these, this energy I put into building my career was built on thoughts and processes that I had adapted to based on what I'd been taught. And I started looking back at what I was claiming to be my success and what created my success. And that's when I started realizing, I spent my life serving others. I spent my life doing before receiving. And I talk about it all the time in the book. For example, I don't talk about when I talk about being successful in sales, the thing I talk about is putting sales into the pipeline. I never once talk about what comes out of the pipeline. That's not my problem. And where did I learn that? I live my life the way I'm supposed to live it based on what God said, and how it comes out isn't my problem. He's going to do it for me. It's going to happen the way he wants it to happen regardless. So I started making these connections and, fortunately, I was successful enough in my sales career that I was able to retire at a reasonable age. And I'm looking at what I'm going to do with this last segment of my life. And I decided I wanted to go all in. I want to go all in. I want to do something. I want to make sure that I get my legacy I leave behind about Mike Hinkle is based on Mike Hinkle's desire to serve God and Mike Hinkle's desire to walk closer with God.
Well, what really matters in a man's life is how you finish, and if you finish well. And that sounds like an incredible method, a credible plan to finish well, Michael. I really appreciate it. I want to just say thank you for this time. If you would like to get Michael's book and his course, not only does he have a book, but he has an online course that mirrors treasure hunt and all the different, incredible pieces of gold that he has to share with you. You can find that right here on this page. It's right here, or maybe it's over here, or maybe it's this way. I don't really know, but it's on the page. You can click on that. Maybe it's a QR code. You can grab it and make an order for his book or his course, or both. And Michael, I just want to thank you so much for being with us today. What a great opportunity. How can they find you um, going forward?
My website is info at michaelhinkle.com. It's got a website there for you. You can actually michaelhinkle.com is how you can find me. www.michaelhinkle.com. My email is info at michaelhinkle.com. And you can find out about me. It's got some testimonials there. It's got some information about some of the different offerings I do. And my goal is to try to create a world full of salespeople that are thought of as being. I'm tired of people, thinking of a salesperson as being someone that's less than human, because we're not. We are human. We just, we just, some of us don't help ourselves.
Amen. All right. Well, I just want to thank you for being here, and thank you to the listeners for joining us on the Compendium Podcast. You can find us right here on this channel for the next guest that we have, where we talk to our authors about the books and the incredible thought leadership that they provide. Make sure that you press the subscribe button or the whatever button it takes to continually put us in front of your feed so that you don't miss an episode. And until next time, may God bless each and every one of you.